The air hung heavy and still over Ridgemont. It was the kind of stillness that felt like anticipation, like the world was holding its breath. Nestled between hills and forgotten by time, Ridgemont was a town where nothing much ever happened. David lived a simple life there. He worked at the local diner, the Busy Bee, flipping burgers and pouring coffee. He spent his evenings on his porch swing watching fireflies blink against the twilight. He was a quiet soul, content in the predictability of his days. He never could have known what lay dormant within him. David felt a strange stirring within him, a sense of unspent energy. It started subtly, like a whisper in the back of his mind. A fleeting thought, a wish for something different. He brushed it off as just another daydream. Little did he know, his life was about to change forever. The world, as he knew it, was on the brink of something extraordinary. It began innocently. David wished for a sip of water while working a double shift at the Busy Bee. Suddenly a glass materialized in his hand, full and cool. He stared at it, bewildered, his pulse quickening. He experimented with small things, a new book, a winning lottery ticket. Each time his wish materialized into reality. Fear warred with excitement within him. He held the power of creation in his hands, a power he couldn't begin to comprehend. He became obsessed, testing the limits of his abilities. He wished for things he'd always desired. A vintage Mustang, a trip to Paris. They appeared instantly, as if conjured from thin air. One sweltering July afternoon, David's frustration with the diner's broken air conditioner reached its peak. "I wish this stupid thing would just break down completely," he muttered under his breath. The lights flickered. The ground vibrated beneath his feet. Then the earth lurched, throwing him off balance. Panic seized the diner. People screamed and scrambled for cover as dishes clattered to the floor. The earthquake, though small, was enough to shake the foundations of Ridgemont. It was a visceral display of David's power, and it terrified him. News of the freak earthquake spread like wildfire. David tried to explain what happened, confessing his ability to his best friend Mark and his sister Emily. Their reactions were a mixture of amusement and concern. They dismissed it as stress or an overactive imagination. David's attempts to prove his powers only pushed them further away. He felt an isolating chasm growing between them, a chasm of disbelief. Their skepticism chipped away at his own conviction, making him question his sanity. Was he going crazy? One evening, as David sat on his porch, two black SUVs pulled up. Men in dark suits and sunglasses emerged, their faces grim and unyielding. They knew about his abilities, they said. They'd been watching him. They were a government agency tasked with containing individuals like him. Fear coiled in David's stomach. He'd never felt so vulnerable, so exposed. He tried to refuse, to run, but they were too quick, too efficient. They sedated him, their faces swimming in and out of focus as the world around him dissolved into darkness. Section 6, Subject 0. David awoke in a sterile white room, a blinding light overhead. He was strapped to a cold metal table, his body heavy and sluggish. A team of scientists in lab coats surrounded him, their eyes cold and clinical, their voices devoid of empathy. He was a lab rat, a specimen to be dissected and analyzed. They bombarded him with tests, probing his mind, pushing his abilities to their limits. He felt like a puppet, manipulated and controlled. The more they experimented, the more disoriented he became, his sense of self fracturing under the relentless scrutiny. Section 7. Alone in the world. During one particularly grueling experiment, David wished with every fibre of his being, "I wish I was the only real thing in this world." The world dissolved around him, the scientists, the lab, everything fading into a white void. He stood alone, suspended in nothingness. Panic swelled within him. He had wished for solitude, for validation, but this wasn't what he intended. He was utterly alone, adrift in a sea of his own making, the weight of his power, the burden of his uniqueness pressed down on him. Section 8. What is real? As David floated in the void, a terrifying thought took root in his mind. What if his wish had come true? What if the scientists, his friends, his family were all figments of his imagination, creations brought to life by his own subconscious? He was trapped in a prison of his own design, the architect of his own reality. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. He was both God and prisoner, the creator and the creation. He had the power to change his reality, to bend the universe to his will. But at what cost? Was true connection, true love, even possible in a world where he was the only genuine being? Section 9. The weight of existence. Slowly, reluctantly, David willed the world back into existence. The lab, the scientists, all reappeared as if nothing had changed. Yet everything was different. He saw through them now, their superficiality, their insignificance. He was lost in a sea of illusions, forever separate, forever alone. He complied with their tests, endured their prodding, but his spirit remained distant, detached. He was a ghost haunting his own life, searching for meaning in a world that suddenly felt hollow and unreal. The weight of existence, the burden of his secret, threatened to crush him. He was the man who manifested earthquakes, and he was utterly alone.